Hello and welcome to Pendant and Ring. Today we are reading part 5 of an ongoing audiobook series. The book is The History of the Tudor and Stuart Princesses by Agnes Strickland. Louis XII, at the church of his family, the Orléans-Valois line, being the Abbey Church of the Celestines in Paris, very solemnly espoused, as proxy for the fair young Mary, the Earl of Worcester, to whom he gave his troth, September 2nd, 1514, and received the promise in return that the young princess should obey him as her lord and master during her natural life, a very odd interpolation of the marriage vow. Old Louis became extremely importunate forthwith for Henry VIII to send him his young queen, and all matters were arranged by the English sovereigns for that purpose as soon as the stormy autumn would permit Mary to cross the narrow seas. Meantime, she received several letters from her affianced spouse, and wrote occasionally to him, epistles much resembling those previously quoted, which present the most favorable specimens of those extant. King Henry, his Queen Catherine, and almost all their court accompanied the bride to Dover, and took up their residence at the grand castellated palace there, with the intention of expediting her immediate transit to France. But the elements seemed obstinately bent against any such purpose. A succession of autumnal storms set in during the rest of September, which detained the king and the royal family a whole month in Dover Castle. Several ships were wrecked on the line of coast beneath their eyes, and not one day promised a safe passage across the narrow seas to the opposite coast. At last the wind proved fair, October 2nd, when the bride and her attendants were roused up at 4 in the morning and hurried for embarkation to the beach, where Henry VIII and his queen came to kiss her and bid her farewell. Many tears and audible lamentations took place when the young bride of France was torn from the arms of Queen Catherine. They had, indeed, been companions during the much larger part of Mary's short life. The Queen gave her sister-in-law into the personal care of Sir Christopher Gervas, or Garnish, her own knight. Henry VIII, as he advanced to the edge of the water to take leave of the weeping bride, renewed his promise of giving her leave to marry according to her own good pleasure the next time, and, ostensibly comforted with the thought of a happy widowhood, Mary submitted to the weary dignities imposed upon her. Ladies sometimes may wed with these views, but they seldom make them matter of history with the naive pertinacity of this young Queen of France. Scarcely had the bride gained the ship in which she was to cross the channel when the wind began to tune up a loud autumn song, and the waves to dance on all sides of the storm which had, with brief intervals, been roaring since the equinox. All the night of October 2nd, Mary's ship was seen laboring in the greatest danger, separated from the rest of the fleet. If it were like its representation in the contemporary illuminations, it was a clumsy junk with very short masts, not easy to overset, but it did its worst by grounding near Boulogne early the next morning, where it obstinately stuck on a sandbank. The forlorn bride had to be lowered into an open boat, completely helpless from seasickness. The breakers were dashing high, and wetted her long golden hair, which streamed most disconsolately over her person. The boat could not approach the beach, and the surf was high on the shallows, so that there was no little danger in landing. But Sir Christopher Gervas was fortunately as tall in stature as was suitable to his Christian name. The French, to their great satisfaction, saw the gigantic islander stride through the breakers, which only reached to his waist, bearing their insensible queen in his arms, and in this guise she touched the shores of France. Every long, bright tress of her hair, and all her garments, streaming piteously with salt water. Mary was received at her landing by the Duc de Vendôme, one of the elder princes of the line of Bourbon, who informed her that her royal lord had advanced as far as Abbeville to anticipate the happiness of meeting her. While the fair young queen rested at Boulogne, her ancient bridegroom was deep in conference at Abbeville with her brother's resident ambassador. After fully discussing the affairs of Spain and the general policy of Europe, the King of France and the English ambassador touched on the more interesting topic of Mistress Jane Popincourt. The Earl of Worcester was prepared to circumvent all the machinations of that young lady and the Duke of Longview, her friend. He was enabled, by information which he had obtained from his own court, to give the King of France particulars of, quote, her evil life and conversation, end quote, of a nature to alarm him. I would, said Worcester in his dispatch to Cardinal Wolsey, have showed the King of France the bills signed, that is, the written testimony of the persons who accused Mistress Jane of impropriety, but in no wise would he hear more speaking of her. "As you love me," exclaimed King Louis, "name her no more. I would she were burnt. For I and my fellows," adds Worcester, "had showed him enow of her ill life." The King of France further observed, "There shall never be put about my wife, either man or woman, but such as shall be to her contentation and pleasure." As to speaking for the said Jane, it was at the suit and desire of Monsieur de Longueville, who had told me that the Queen loved and trusted her above all the gentlewomen that were about her. But if King Henry made her to be burnt, he shall do but well and a good deed. All this agitation about Mistress Jane Popincourt leads to the supposition that she was a Frenchwoman, for her surname is certainly French or Belgic, that she had negotiated the marriage of her princess by means of the Duc de Longueville during the time of his captivity in England, and that now the matter was completed she was to be driven from her royal lady as not being sufficiently in the English interest. While the good name of Mistress Popincourt was receiving damage in the preceding discussion, news arrived that the Queen had landed, which was this morning, October 3rd, continues Worcester. Since the King heard thereof, nothing can displease him, and he is devising new collars, necklaces, and goodly gear for her. There was in his chamber only my Lord of Paris, the Archbishop of Paris, Robertet, and I, when he showed me the goodliest and the richest sight of jewels that I ever saw. I would never have believed it if I had not seen it, for I assure you that all I have ever seen is not to compare to 46 great pieces that I saw of diamonds and rubies, and 7 of the greatest pearls that I have seen, besides a great number of other goodly diamonds, rubies, halas, and great pearls. The worst of his second sort of stones he prized at 2,000 ducats. For 10 or 12 of the principal stones he hath refused for each 100,000 ducats. And when the King of France had shown me all, he said that all should be for his wife. Another of these Aladdin-like coffers, full of girdles, necklaces, chains, and bracelets, was opened by the royal bridegroom, the contents being viewed and admired with unfeigned enthusiasm by the English ambassador. Jewels have a certain utility as the means of investing great masses of capital in very small space, but that was not the light in which the politicians of the 16th century surveyed them. Grim old warriors and careworn statesmen actually coveted these pretty sparkly things to encrust them on their cloaks and doublets and to hang them round their necks. Louis XII was consistent so far with his good character for good sense that he dressed very plainly, and only meant his vast store of jewels as playthings for his fair wife, judiciously using them to obtain for him a place in her good graces as far as they would go. "My wife," said Louis XII, merrily laughing, "shall not have these at once, but at divers times, for I will have many, and at divers times, kisses and thanks for them. I assure you," continues Worcester, "the king thinketh every hour a day till he seeth her. He is never well but when he hears her spoken of. I make no doubt she will lead a good life with him by the grace of God." The young Queen of France, attended by near relatives, the Lady Anne and the Lady Elizabeth Grey, set forth towards Abbeville October 4th. They were followed by 34 female attendants, amongst whom was Mademoiselle de Boleyn, the celebrated Anne, who afterwards, to her sorrow, attained the crown matrimonial of England. The bridal party travelled in horse litters or wagons, but when the weather was fine and they were in spirits to assume their full dress riding suits of crimson velvet, the maiden train mounted their palfreys. The Duke of Norfolk led the way, while the rear was brought up by the young Queen's archer guard and baggage wagons. Thus they went forward by easy stages until within 4 miles of Abbeville. Singularly interesting was this ground to the daughter of the English royal line. To her left hand was the forest of Crécy, skirting the celebrated battlefield of that name. To her right was the village of St. Valery, on the mouth of the Somme, from whence her ancestor the Conqueror sailed to invade England. Yet it is by no means certain that Mary Tudor had a thought to bestow on the glory of her ancestors. The royal princess's cortege was first encountered by the heir presumptive of France, the Duke of Valois, afterward Francis I, who then for the first time beheld the princess whom, young as she was, he was henceforth to treat as his queen and mother. From some hints given by the officers of the train of Francois, the attendants of the bride were led to expect a more important encounter before they entered Abbeville. A halt was made, and an elaborate arrangement of travelling toilets took place. The young queen was dressed in her litter by her ladies in grand costume, not in very good taste, for the skirt, as well as the bodice of her habit, was as heavily plated with goldsmith work as if it were meant for a suit of armour. As the whole cortege approached the forest of Ardres, they were met by the infirm royal bridegroom, mounted on a stately charger. Mary's cumbrous robes of goldsmith's work impeded her attempts to comply with etiquette, which required her to dismount and offer her consort the homage of the knee. Louis perceived her embarrassment and entreated her to forbear. He welcomed her kindly and courteously, and having conversed with her for a few moments, took his leave, having come in a manner by stealth to look upon her beauty, with which he professed himself enraptured.